Good afternoon. This is Michael Harding.
And this is Christina Harding.
And we're here for On the Arts, that show that's dedicated to blowing the lid off of all of these wonderful little artistic secrets that we have going on down here in southern Utah. Not only events that you can attend to experience the art, but also some projects that you might be able to even participate in. As well, we've discovered that there are a lot of wonderful personalities down here.
Oh, so many.
The people behind the arts that we do get an opportunity to get to know on this show.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, we get to see the people behind the art. That's
Absolutely. The people who make it happen.
Yes.
And we've been very proud of the lineup that we've had over the last previous 2 seasons. We are now in season 3 of On the Arts.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful that we don't really have to go soliciting too much for artists. We found that artists of all sorts, all genres, musicians and actors and theater folks and
Dancers.
painters and sculptors and dancers and curators. We're going to have Kathy Cecilwitz on, the curator of the Sears Gallery, in just a few weeks. We've had all sorts of people on, and they all love to tell us their stories.
Yes.
Love
to talk. Yeah.
Absolutely fabulous.
That's a true artist.
Wait, I think every single show that we've had, we get to the end of the show, and it's kind of like looking at dinner plates in the eyes of our guests. They say, "Are we really done already?" Lots to talk about. Well, we do have a very special guest here in the studio, somebody that both Christina and I have been wanting to get on the air for a while, and we're very blessed to have him here with us, Del Parson, who's a painter here in southern Utah. Now, to get things rolling, I always like to get into this. I'm going to kick it off.
All right. I'm excited.
And I had to apologize to Del earlier as our guest at how embarrassingly ignorant I was to the world of painting and art until relatively recently, I have to tell you. When I was a kid, of course, everybody painted. Everybody had finger paints, and you had those really talented kids who could draw a cat, and it actually looked kind of like a cat. Yeah, they were the special ones in the neighborhood. And, there was this television show that came on Saturday afternoons on PBS, a very soft-spoken guy with a huge afro. That was Bob Ross was his name, actually. And I remember watching, and I was fascinated by how he could make these pictures, but I was kind of pulled into this trance of his way of speaking, and now he's become a real icon of America. But, I grew up thinking that was art, that was painting, and it was, but it didn't even start to scratch the surface of how art, visual arts particularly, could affect me or other, for lack of a better word, audience members or people who were experiencing the art. I was taken to museums by my grandparents, and I would see great paintings. I was told they were great paintings, and I thought, oh, they're pretty, but I didn't quite understand. And I remember I was backstage of a show at Virginia Shakespeare Festival, and this was a long, long, long time ago. And I had about 20 minutes before my next entrance, so I picked up a copy of The New Yorker. And there was an article in there, and I will never forget this. The title really got me, and it was The Art of Prison Life. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting, intriguing. And it turned out to be an article about this guy who was serving actually quite a long sentence in a penitentiary for being an art thief. And I found that really interesting because, I had the stereotypes, just like my stereotype of a painter was Bob Ross, who actually I do find a fascinating individual now that I've actually started to look at him and his career and such. But I had this image, this stereotype of what a prisoner in a penitentiary would look like. And this guy did have an orange jumpsuit on, but he had a beard and a mustache. And he could have been that English professor over in the pub, with his clove cigarette and his glass of ale. And I just remember he could have had a monocle, and it would have fit, perfectly on his face. And I was intrigued by this. And I read that he was this art thief, and apparently he was a rather prolific art thief, I guess would be the word for it. He had stolen a lot of great paintings. I hadn't heard of a lot of them. I hadn't heard of a lot of the artists, but he was behind a lot of the major art heists of about 2 decades. And, I thought, wow, what would drive a person to steal the art? I mean, the money must be amazing, with all of these great pieces of art. And the article got into how difficult that really is to sell because these are famous works of art, and how do you, sell them without having alerts raised and such? And something particular stood out to me. It was when he was being interviewed, and the interviewer said, "So is it for the money that you do this?" And the interviewer said he just stopped and was quiet, and he said, "I don't care about the money. I love the painting and I want it." And I thought, wow, that's actually something, if I were going to go steal major art, I would think, well, there's got to be a paycheck somewhere in that. But he was truly affected by it. And that stood with me to this day, how somebody could be that affected that they would go to such measures, to get this. And it was at that point, and I do owe it to this article, actually, that I started to ask the question, what is it about visual art that grabs people? What is it that makes it special? And of course, that can extend into music and theater, which is where the world in which I live. And, you as well, we have lots of thoughts about, what is theater? Why does it matter? Do we really want to do it anymore? Is the paycheck worth it? Yeah. And there is that thing that drives you to it.
You have to.
And absolutely. It's just, and it's a world in which I'm comfortable and what have you. And I really do like the expression. And this is the part that I feel embarrassingly ignorant about for a lot of my life, was that somebody could feel the same way about creating a painting. It's not just making a picture, but there's something wonderful and deeper about it. And a name that I've heard, even before I moved to Utah, I've only been here, in southern Utah for about 10 years, and I'm very proud of having been all over the country and, out of the country and such. But a name I have heard is Del Parson for various reasons. And I'm thrilled that you've decided to join us today. Yes. Welcome to the show, Del.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Well, Del, go ahead.
Would you like me to answer that question?
Oh,
yes,
I would love
absolutely.
It. After that long question. Yeah.
That was a great question. Basically, as an artist, when I first started doing art, I was in college, and that's what I did better at than anything else. It seemed like it wasn't necessarily. It kind of was who I am. You'd go to art class, and it was like heaven. It was like home, and you would do it. And I did that better than, say, chemistry or English. And so I just naturally gravitated to it. So at that time, it was for the love. However, when I got out of college and I had a family, I had a family of like 6 children, and my only income was through my art, things changed quite drastically. True, I had this love, unbelievable love, but I also had to feed my family. So you had to kind of blend those two together. And so in some ways, there was this idea that art became a product along with a love. And I also found when I was doing something to make money, if this was my attitude when I was doing a painting, I would do it with the idea, if this is my last painting I'll ever see, if I'll ever have, if I did that painting, it would sell. If I tried to say I'm doing it to sell, it wouldn't. So even though you're trying to sell something, you had to do something pretty good, because I was doing paintings for galleries, and the gallery that I was in, there might be 300 paintings in the gallery. Why would a person come through and buy yours? And so that was my life. And also, if you didn't continually sell paintings, you're out of the gallery. So there's this pressure on. I don't know if that answered it at all, but there's the money thing, and it is like people, because it is very, very expensive to buy canvas, to buy frames, to buy paints. Unless you have somebody that's just helping you, finance you, I don't think you can be an artist for very long unless you do sell a painting every once in a while. You can't.
Well, that's where I know there are a lot of artists throughout history, not even just painters, and many of the artists really did have benefactors, many of them up in high places. But a name that I think a lot of people will relate to, Johann Sebastian Bach. We know that he wrote in order to support his family. All of these great, great works that we say, oh, he must have been inspired and such. And yes, I do believe there's inspiration involved and such, but it kind of deflates a lot of people when they find out he wrote it because he needed to feed his children. Even Charles Dickens, what a great, great writer. And then it takes a little bit of the romance out when you realize he was paid by the word, which is why sometimes his stories go on and on and on. But I think that is a reality that I think is really interesting to discuss. You know, where is the line between making a living and having a life as an artist?
A very tough question. The fact of the matter is, I look back at my career, and I know that I wouldn't have worked that hard if I wouldn't have had to. I mean, it was unbelievably hard work. You know, I would work 6 days a week, sometimes 8, 10 hours a day. I remember when I was in the gallery, that's what I did. I would start Monday morning, and I'd say by Saturday night, and I'm a Christian, so I'd say it. So my time when I'd say I can't paint anymore is at 1 o'clock.
Right.
But I would, if it wasn't done, I'd keep painting until then. And then that was because that was a thing that you not necessarily you say that's what I want to do. That's kind of what you had to do. But I look back and I go, wow, some wonderful, wonderful paintings that were created. But I don't think I would have done that just for fun or just because that's something to do. And so I think when people think about the arts, if you're thinking about a living, it's a different thing. It's your life. It's not, something you casually do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. I had a very good friend and colleague, Varlo Davenport, who actually is very vocal about the fact that if you're going to be an actor, you better go out and act. If you're going to be a writer, you write. If you want to be a playwright, write plays. You can't just wait for the inspiration to come to you. You've got to be the WRIGHT, the right, the professional who does it. So I think that's a wonderful thing to remember. One of the things that I teach my playwrights is that art is craft, not inspiration. The inspiration comes to you, but you better darn well put the effort into making the craft.
Yeah, like whenever I hear somebody, well, I'm not feeling it. I'm just not inspired today. I've never woke up and said I'm not inspired. There's no such thing as not inspired. And I've even heard people that I think Robert Louis Stevenson. I think he had some health problems or something, and he would write every single day. One day he said, "I'm going to look back and see. I bet I can tell the day I was feeling lousy." He went back and looked at his writing. He couldn't tell. and I think it's the same with me. You get up and you do it. I don't work as hard as I used to be honest. I'm getting older and I'm kind of slowing down a little bit. But there's no such thing as I'm not feeling inspired today. You just did it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's where you mentioned that it was in college that you started painting. Was that what you said?
Well, my dad is an artist.
Okay.
I was exposed to art all my life. When I was younger, I was thinking about maybe, what career do you want to go on into? And I was thinking I really love the outdoors. I thought maybe life science and be something where I'm outside working. But I just gravitated towards arts. There's just something about the smell of oil paint or charcoal or anything, and it's just wonderful. My first class was drawing people, and I just started doing it. I go, wow, I can do this. And it was just this magical moment that is just so wonderful, and it's still there.
So when you first started drawing, it just came to you, and you just knew, because I know when I've tried to do this, I'm terrible.
We have the opposite experience.
Yes,
I can do this. I shouldn't do this.
I think back to my 7th grade art class, and I thought, oh, I'm amazing. And then I would look at it after I'm done and going, what was I thinking? And so how was that?
I think say for instance, I remember in junior high or something, there was on TV, there was a cartoon, Fred Flintstone. Yeah. I just look at that and I go, I can draw that. And I just drew it.
You just drew it.
I just drew it. So I think that some people have that ability, just to kind of a natural inclination. But if I said I'm talented, I'd say the only reason that I've been a little successful is I've worked harder than somebody else.
Worked harder. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to work so hard, and then there's some magic that I don't think it's the elves that sneak in, because every
I
time
wish.
every time in the morning I wake up and I run in to say, "Did the elves come last night?" They never have.
They've never
never
painted for you. Okay.
But sometimes I'm painting and I go, "How did I do that?" You're painting and you go, "Wow, that's cool." And I guess maybe an artist is a person that recognizes that and they don't mess it up.
Is there any inspiration that you use when you are painting something? Music, or do you have books on tape, or is it just quiet?
Boy, when I'm painting, quiet.
Quiet.
I've tried music and it just kind of affects my emotions, and I just don't like that. Every once in a while, when I just can't take anymore, maybe I turn on the TV and watch baseball. Baseball, you can watch.
Baseball.
Who's your team? I gotta ask.
Sorry, the Yankees.
Well,
thank you for being accepting. But I like the Yankees.
Well, I'm on the other coast. I'm the Seattle Mariners, so it's like we're not direct.
Okay, yeah.
In fact, we feed most of the Yankees players, going back to A-Rod and such. But.
Right. So yeah.
Well, you mentioned that you really enjoy the outdoors.
Yes.
And, of course, I'm sure we're going to get to something that you are very well known for, a lot of your religious work.
Yes.
And paintings that are very iconic, and not only anymore in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but also outside. I was not raised LDS, and I knew your name. So there are... it has certainly filtered out, if you will. But you mentioned that you really like the outside. I understand you've done a lot of landscapes as well and outdoor paintings.
Right. When I was painting for galleries, most of my work was landscape, like Western genre. So it was a lot of landscape paintings when I do things for galleries. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
And were these galleries in southern Utah?
I had basically, when I was doing it, there was 3 locations. There was one in California, there was one in Texas, and the other one was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was a really, really well-known gallery, really well, did well for me. So they had 3 locations. And then there was another one in Texas, so I had 2 in Texas, but anyway.
Well, we talked a little bit about when you got out of college and you all of a sudden had to support your family on this as a job. I'm just curious, how do you get into the business of being a painter? Is it just you have a lot and you distribute and hope somebody picks you up? Or we mentioned, I think it was 2 shows ago, we were talking about show business, and that's something that you do have to think about. As a painter, you leave college, you've been painting. What do you do?
Well, there's. I wish I had the secret answer so I could tell all artists this is what you do. But I've really, with me, when I was in that business, the art business, I think I spent a great big part of my energy and time trying to figure out business. You'd try maybe 10 things and one would work out. But I guess what I would say is, if you're in the business of art, I looked at art as a product. You're saying, I'm going to make sure that somebody wants this painting. If nobody wants the painting, you're not going to do very well.
You become that bitter artist. No one gets my art.
I know.
Not interpreting.
And I don't really know if it's like, are you a sellout or whatever, but I just think that's what I do. Even when right now I do a lot of religious art, and we sell prints. Sometimes I do a painting and I think it's going to be magnificent, and we put it out there as prints, and it's really interesting if I'm at a show or something and people come look at it. Sometimes I don't know for sure if it's going to be a sellable painting. I just don't know if it's going to be a sellable print. But if you do it, you give it your best, and you have all these prints here, and if you put a new one out, in very shortly you'll know if people are going to like it or not. And that's one of the things you do. So you have to put a lot of stuff out, and then you kind of start figuring out, well, what sells this? And I would say that for me, the thing that I've kind of found is if you have some emotion, some kind of feeling that people are going to look at, and that's what I'm kind of searching. Even when I'm doing a painting, I kind of paint on it, and you're just going, does it have any feeling? If it doesn't have feeling and emotion and heart, it's just not going to be very inviting.
So I have to say that I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that I was amazed that someone could feel so deeply from what I used to call a static picture. And please know I'm coming from a place of having slowly gained in appreciation. I remember my introduction to looking at paintings and finding the emotion came from a very technical place. I was studying lighting design, and the teacher would have us look at great paintings. Again, he kept using that word, great paintings that have been used over and over. And what we were looking at them for was the source of light. More than anything, and I'm not talking Thomas Kincaid, painter of light, which is a style, I guess would be called. Right. But this was, in the great pieces, Van Gogh, these paintings, the Dancer series, not Van Gogh, but
Degas.
Degas. Thank you very much. I was about to show severe ignorance, but we were looking at sources of light and such. And I remember it was the Dancer series that I was looking at some of these pictures, saying, "Well, that's kind of beautiful," or I could almost feel the line. And my lighting designer teacher, a gentleman, a wonderful artist named Christopher Bowl, actually leapt on that. And he was like, and now look at the curve of the arm. And now look at, how the artist has, forgive me, but manipulated you psychologically to look here, then look here, and then look here. And I have to say, even though it started on that technical plane, all of a sudden I was able to be swept into some emotion. You mentioned earlier that sometimes you would paint something and say, "Hey, that's really great. Where did that come from?" I have to ask this: do the emotions come first and then the picture comes out of it, or do you start working on a picture and then the emotions carry you to finish the picture?
Okay, with me, what I do is I probably have to come up with ideas. So let's say I'm going to do a painting. I probably start listing possible ideas. I might say, and just throw it out, just brainstorming. A lot of times my wife and I are going on a trip or something, or driving around and say, so I have her pull out a piece of paper and we just start writing down possible ideas. And then it sort of seems like those ideas, you just start looking at them and thinking about them. And then I kind of paint the painting in my mind. You look at the painting and you kind of say, this is what it looks like. This is, I see some possibilities here. And then you have to kind of feel for that subject that you're looking at, that incident, that story, or you're not going to want to do it. So I think it is a mental thing before you get any further than that. Yeah.
Gotcha. Can you actually, when you start a painting, have you already planned out the entirety of the picture? Or are there times when you're in the middle of it and you say, "Oh, I'm going to put something over there"? I think it was Walt Whitman that, no, Walt Whitman, that's not a painter right there. Whistler, I apologize. Okay. When he was painting the harbor, and I don't even know if this is a true story or not, but he had somebody look behind him and say, "Well, I see what you're painting there, but that buoy there, that's not there in your image. Why did you put it there?" And he said something like, "Well, that was just a mistake of nature to not have it there, so I fixed it." I imagine, do you have that kind of improvisation as you paint?
I do, and all the different kinds of people work in different ways. My paintings just sometimes migrate and do all kinds of funny things. I remember one painting, if you scraped away the paint, there would be maybe 6 paintings underneath. I wish I was more... I could just start and finish, and I don't know for sure where it's going to go. It just kind of happens. So, like if also, but you sort of just have a feeling. But sometimes, what's interesting, I remember my wife is my best critic, and and some, like, the best thing she does, she comes and just takes it away. And I remember asking her one time, "What do you think about this painting?" She said, "It was so much better 2 weeks ago."
Should have stopped then.
Yeah, we should have stopped 2 weeks ago. So,
yeah,
and it's art. It is art. There's no guarantees. I think just recently I worked on a painting for probably 2 months, and then I just scraped it off. It just wasn't working. I tried and I tried and I tried. It just didn't work.
Is that something as a teacher? When you're teaching your students, you have to, I would assume that it would have to be an individual. You'd have to go off of the personality of the student. I can imagine some students are impatient and think that, it's just going to suddenly, there's going to be magic. And I'm sure that's a huge learning curve for them, learning to be patient with their work. How do you, do you feel that emotion with the student, or how do you connect with the student, I guess is what I'm asking, to help them Because I'm sure, not all of you are the same. So
right.
how do they get that out of them?
As a teacher, what you do is you probably teach the fundamentals, and you go there, and everybody, of course, is going to have different kinds of, like, some people are quick, some people are a little slower and things. With a student, I just think you just have to look at them, and I hope for inspiration when I'm dealing with students almost as much more than painting. Because you go, how can I help this person? What can you do? And sometimes there's no real way to learn how to paint except to do it. And so you do it, and then you kind of say, okay, this worked pretty good. There's a lot of things that are working here, but maybe go try this, try that. It's the same as acting, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
The only way to learn to act is by doing it. And that's the same with painting or drawing. You just have to get in there and do it. And then some things are going to work and some things aren't. But I think it's a good idea with art. There are some real fundamentals that are good to learn, and then you can expand from there. So I think I really start with some fundamentals.
And I have a lot of friends who have started painting, and then they stop because of just the frustration. What do you think is that pulling thing that would make somebody move on? I mean, you said it was hard work. They have to keep going. But what do you think? It seems like a wall goes up and they just say, okay, I'm going to put my paints away and it's not for me. And what would you say? And yet they have an ability.
I think that's a good decision, to be honest with you. Because
save your life. Yeah.
No, I would say that the worst critic is always yourself. Because you're looking at and if it's good or bad. I mean, nobody has to tell you that's good, a good painting or not. And if you don't have that, boy, then you're in worse trouble. If you can't be self-critical. But I would say that I think it's okay. It's sometimes like maybe I might say something like, "Gee, I want to play the piano," and I play for a little while, and I go, "It's not worth it to me." I enjoyed it, but now I want to do something else. So I think it's fine, and And sometimes I see a student that I haven't seen for 20 years, and they come in. The first thing, they're just so apologetic because they're not painting anymore.
Yeah,
I'm actually thrilled because whatever they do is great. If they go out and they paint and they enjoy it and they can feed their family and stuff, that is fantastic. But if they're selling insurance and they're happy and they have a wonderful family, that's a success. That's a success, and that might even be a better painting. Like if when your life is a painting, you're doing it, and so that might be better than doing something else.
I have to tell you, what I'm really enjoying about this interview. I mean, I'm enjoying a lot of things about it, but sometimes we'll have musicians in here or other actors or directors, and both Christine and I, we have a fair amount of experience with that. I'm in a very deep ocean of not knowing how to swim when it comes to painting. And this, I'm just thrilled to ask some of these questions. Now, I just want to share an experience that I had when you were talking about scraping the paint off of the canvas. That actually gives some hope to someone who may try to paint and then gave it up. I used to think that when you were painting, it was just permanent. You put that mark on there and there was nothing you could do. And that actually makes it almost accessible to do this. And I remember I was reading the stories of Paddington Bear. And these are all random thoughts from my life where painting has come into it. And I remember whoever it was that Paddington lived with had a painting that when Paddington saw it, half the painting was beautiful. And the other half, the paint had been peeled off and there was a painting underneath. And it was revealed that, a lot of times painters, as you mentioned earlier, couldn't afford the canvas. So they would just paint over an existing painting. And I remember the story went that, Paddington was fascinated. I'm glad I never did this. I would have gotten into a lot of trouble. But started peeling the paint off of every painting he found, trying to find the hidden picture underneath. I don't know why I just shared that, but it just made me very, very excited. Now, I would like to transition a bit. You are very well known for your religious art,
yes,
particularly. And we were discussing earlier, somewhere around the ballpark of about 300 paintings have been commissioned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. How did that all get going?
Okay. When I was in college and I met the girl of my dreams, and I was really concerned about this idea that I wanted to be an artist. And just this thought, how can you be an artist and have a family? kind of thing. And I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it was just overwhelming. And I just really felt like I wanted some help from God, and so I had what's called a patriarchal blessing. It's just sort of like if you're in the Indian culture or something, it'd be like a medicine dream or something.
Right.
But in this patriarchal blessing, it just said something that art would be a joy to me in my life, that it would help me explain the ways of the Lord to many. I would influence many lives for good. Anyway, and I don't want to really quote the thing, but right then I knew I was going to be an artist, and I was going to do some paintings of God, Christ kind of paintings. And so, I've always had that in the back of my mind. And even like when I started making a living, I was actually doing paintings for galleries and things, but I really had to go and show my artwork to the church in other words, I took my portfolio to the church, and then they gave me a few paintings. I never have ever worked full time for the church. And sometimes when I was painting, maybe about every 5 or 6 paintings I was doing, I would be asked to do that. But in 1983, I did a painting. They asked me to do a painting of the Savior. In fact, they asked me to do 3 paintings, and I'd never really done something like that before. And I remember just being terrified. But anyway, I did it. I did it, and one was a red robe Christ, another one washing the feet, and another one knocking on the door. And it seemed like after that, people started asking me, since I'm a commercial artist a little bit, people started asking me, and I've even done paintings for Catholics, for the Catholic. Well, it wasn't necessarily for the Catholics; it was for a Jewish company that printed prints for the Catholic Church in New York. But I just started doing those, and people just asked me to do that, and then somebody else asked me, a print company said, can you do us some paintings so we can make prints? So it all came from that one painting, so it's just almost if you do something kind of nice, people notice it, and then they keep asking you to do that. So that's kind of where it came from. But I've always felt a real obligation to God after that patriarchal blessing, that was my calling, and that's my duty to do paintings for Him. And so it's always there.
And is that the majority of the work you do now as well? I mean, you said you slowed down a little bit just in your painting life, but is the majority of your work religious paintings now?
Right now, I do, and probably one of the reasons I go, God, painting the Savior compared to something else, the Savior is so magnificent to me. Something else just isn't as cool,
right?
It just kind of a letdown, So it's hard not to do that, but it's really difficult to come up with a new idea. I think I've painted almost everything I can think of. You said, I've done like 300 paintings for the church, but I've done hundreds of others besides that. Mm-hmm. In fact, probably a lot of the paintings you see that you'd think that I did for the church, I actually did for somebody else, and then I just say, you can use these paintings, and I just let them use the painting. Yeah.
Well, you talk about where you come up with a picture in your mind, or elements of the picture, or what have you. I don't mean to put words in your mouth.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
But I have to ask as well, do you use models and such for it? I mean, painting the Savior, for example, I don't think we have a photograph that you can work off of. In painting any figures from history of whatever walk of life, I would imagine you'd have to have some basis. Mm-hmm. Do you use models?
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories is I teach at the university here, and I was looking for a painting of the Savior, and I looked, I was teaching a 10-10 class, Intro to Art, just a lecture class, and I looked and I said, I see this young man. He doesn't have a beard, he doesn't have long hair, but there's something about him that I just wanted to paint. I asked him to pose. We went out and did a painting, and it was a painting of a lamb. I did that, but what's interesting, I found out later that he was actually offered a contract to play Major League Baseball. He was a baseball player here, and he didn't do it because he was going on a mission. When I found that out, but anyway, just something like that. just inspires me so much. And also the painting I was planning on doing, it didn't work out. When we went out I got a lamb, we went out and I was planning on putting on the shoulders, and it just didn't look right. And all of a sudden I look over and this young man was holding this lamb, comforting this lamb. I go, there's the painting. I didn't have to do anything. There it was. So that's so you have to be. Sometimes again, I think it's a tender mercy. It's a gift, and you just have to be there for it.
That's it. And how wonderful that you get to be a conduit of these inspirations on the canvas and such.
Right.
I've seen a lot of your paintings, as I'm sure a lot of people have, in various settings. And do you have, I need to go into style just a little bit. Do you have any kind of departure from realism or a departure from, I would say even just biblical pictures? Have you ever, I don't know, done a little cubist work or maybe done some impressionism above and beyond?
When I was younger, I thought, what's my style? And I just paint. And I actually think what a style is the way I solve problems. Sometimes I go, when I'm doing a painting, I might go, I just don't know for sure. I want a sort of a feeling here, so maybe I just go really loose in the background or something. And it's not because that's my style, but it kind of tells the story the best. Or you might choose a certain color. But I just kind of think a style is the way that a person figures something out, and that becomes them. And that's her signature. So I don't even think about that. But sometimes I look and I see something I'm just really inspired by, and I go, I'm going to try something like that. I do that all the time. Or I'm driving down the road and I see just some beautiful sunset or something. I go, wow, I just love that feeling, and I'm going to try to get that feeling in this picture I'm doing.
Well, kind of not to demean that, but kind of like looking at Fred Flintstone saying, I can draw that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
So you said color has some. This is hard for me to phrase because I'm not a painter, but the color it evokes an emotion,
right?
And when you're painting, and I'm starting to think about all these pictures of paintings and memories I've seen of your paintings going through my mind, and is that how you get the story out? Is through the colors? Do you see the colors in your mind, or did you just go? You try a color and go, no, that's not the right one, or
Well, there's certain colors for me, and I guess you just have to say this is what feels what this color does for me, and I hope that it does for somebody else. I don't know, and there's a certain color that I just love, and it's kind of a golden color, and it says spirituality to me. But it might even be color or the value, lights and darks, but there's just when you're painting, and this is kind of spacey, but you just look at it and you say, boy, that feels a certain way, and you just keep working on it till it feels a certain feeling. And so there's no real answer.
Yeah, and so that's that. I would assume that's teaching a student this to feel. They have to really tap into their emotions.
They do,
and
I
therapeutic thing to do.
I honestly can't teach that.
Yeah,
you can't teach that, and sometimes, like if I'm working on a painting, I go, well, how did I get the feeling? I go, I don't know. I don't even know how I did it. I just go.
Yeah.
I just.
There.
Sometimes I'm painting, and I go.
It's there.
It happened, but I don't know. I like for me to explain how to do it. I wouldn't be able to explain how to do it. You'd say, well, you just soften something here, you harden something here, you put a little more light here, you put a little bit more color here. And you're sitting there feeling it, but say a painting might take quite a while. But why it takes so long? It might not be if you just said I'm going to do a painting and get it done, but you might be looking at just a little bit of dark on it, like maybe on the corner of his mouth. A little bit of dark here can change the whole expression of his face. It's just like sort of like just a little teeny bit in your eye, what a person's thinking. It's just a little, and so you're sitting there fussing with this little teeny subtleties until it feels just right. And sometimes it takes some mistakes. Do you go, you go up? No, that wasn't good. Down, back and forth, all these emotions, and you go, this is the one that I'm settling on.
Well, that's right. You mentioned that your father was an artist.
Yes.
And I read somewhere that you had several siblings. It wasn't necessarily a small family. Am I correct on that?
There's 9 children in my family.
Okay, I'm going to say that's a large family.
That's a large family.
It was me and my brother growing up, so I'm going to say that's a large family. When you talk about inspiration and such, was it important to your father, for example, that he instill this love of art in you or promote it? Or was it just something that you watched him or watched one of your siblings that just naturally took you? Was it a big family thing, I should say?
There was kind of a family thing. Every year my dad was kind of he ran the Eastern Idaho State Fair. So he would encourage us to put something in. And so there was this competition. A little bit, and so every year you'd put something in, and like, I think that's one of the things that happened. Mm-hmm. And then my dad would just, whenever he'd go to a town, he would take us all to the gallery or a museum, and so we'd go see that. Or my dad loved to paint outdoors, and we had this station. We called it a woody because it had wood along the old Mercury station with wood along the sides.
Right.
But we'd have a camp trailer behind, but we'd be driving down the road, and my dad would just pull over, see something, just pull over, grab his paints, and start painting. So that was my childhood.
And the ice cream's melting in the back seat.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right.
This is important. Mm-hmm. But my dad loved art. He never, I don't think he ever preached or encouraged other than his love of something. And I have 3 other brothers, 2 are artists. And so and I have a brother that's really a well-known artist, so I just really think that just being around it,
mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Right.
And I do want to encourage our listeners just to remember that we are broadcasting video as well. The reason I bring that up is to watch our guest, Del Parson, talk about some of these things. You can see, and I hope I'm not embarrassing you on this, but you can see a softness and intensity under the softness and just...
we kind of got caught up in that, didn't we, for a moment there?
Telling us the story, just
awesome.
a joy in sharing. You can watch if you go to Radio St. George on Facebook. Mm-hmm. That's Radio space ST space George. You can see the live broadcast being broadcast right now, or you can also check out the archived broadcast. It will be there at any time on that Facebook page. You can also like us. We do have an
Please
On
like
the
us.
Arts Facebook page.
Yeah. We're likable.
And we also do broadcast live as well on YouTube. And if you do go in and search for On the Arts, Michael and Christina, and also Del Parson or any of our other guests, you will actually be able to pull up that interview. And I would highly encourage it. Several of our guests, it's interesting, like when you were talking about the darkness on the side of the mouth, it was so wonderful to see the demonstration. I thought, well, we are on radio.
And
I
now
hope
we're going to be
people do
looking
check
at
this
everybody's
out.
faces for a while, just checking out your shadows and all
that. Just I cannot look at a painting and not look at the light. I can't, because that was my introduction, and I start looking at the source.
I have to ask, though, do you have a lot of returning students in the art program currently?
Or non-traditional?
Or non-traditional, yes.
I do. Boy, and I just think the world of them. Right now, I would, it fluctuates, and there is this thing where, House Bill 62, that if a person wants to, they can come and take, but it has to be room only. And sometimes there's room and sometimes there isn't. But I would say in a typical class, there's at least 3 or 4 people. And it's so great to see an older person. My favorite story about this is became my best friend, but he was a dentist, and he told me he just hated his job, and he said, I just got to get out of it. So he retired at 58, and he came to Dixie. Before he got done, his name was Wallace Lee. He was one of the most well-known watercolor artists in the Western states.
Good for him. Yeah.
But it was just neat to sit, and I think that's one thing about, if I wanted to be an NFL football player, I don't have a chance.
Yeah.
But like with art, I think you can do that your whole life, and even if being a piano player, I don't know if you have the dexterity or something, but with art, people can later in their life, if they choose, that's something that they can have a possibility at. And I've seen it.
Oh.
Well, let me ask you, where can we see some of your work coming up? Is there a gallery showing coming up, or? Okay,
there's the Sears show coming up, and I think that's going to be in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And I have a couple paintings in there. And then like there's Costco shows with prints. So they have these shows that go around and sell prints.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Got it. I would encourage all of our listeners, certainly do keep an eye out and an ear out for information. We do have, I believe it's on the 15th, February 15th is the Dixie Invitational Art Show and Sale. There'll be an art show or an artist symposium at 3 p.m. on the 15th. That is a free event. Let's see, and that's going to feature the 2018 Purchase Prize winner, Rhett Ashby, is going to be there. And also, if you are listening, Julie Rogers, I have loved your paintings since I've been here. I feel like such a doting fan here. I have not met you yet. Kathy Cecilwitz, the curator, has promised to introduce me. Please come by On the Arts and say hello. I just want to tell you how much I love your work. And there will be an art show preview at 4 p.m. on February 15th, a gala and pre-sale at 6 p.m. Please know that is $75 per person. This is a fundraising event as well as an artistic offering. And then there are some special exhibition hours for this show on February 16th through March 31st. The gallery will be open from Monday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So please do come and check it out. Yep. And also, we had some other events that were coming up.
Oh, yes. This weekend, we have Chase McPhee will be doing his stand-up comedy at the Office Lounge, so people can go online and check that out. He would love to share his comedy with everyone.
And of course, a former guest here on the show.
Yes, and then Tuesday, we have Glenn Webb coming back, and
Rhonda Rhodes has actually agreed to come on
with the Rebel
as well.
Jazz Band, so we'll be talking to them. And then we'll have Thursday next week, Kathy
Cecilitz, the curator.
Your curator, Sears Gallery. So we have some wonderful guests coming up.
So please do keep your ear to the radio to hear this. Del Parson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
As is always the case, the time has gone by way too fast. But we do hope that you'll continue to seek out opportunities to not only witness art, but be a part of art. And until you hear from us again, keep your focus on the arts.